Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan. Welcome to my live stream. It's July 30th, and as you can tell, I don't have my books behind me. I'm on the road. Sorry, I'm having a bad hair day. Let me fix that. Not so great. Anyway, welcome everybody to Freedom of Mind. So much going on. Let me just start with a very important podcast and Substack blog. The Substack blog is more updated than the interview with Dr. Tracy Woodruff, former EPA science policy advisor. And if you've been following the news, the Environmental Protection Agency has been systematically disempowered, and it's horrible for human beings and great for fossil fuel companies that want to um, generate electricity through fossil fuels. And with all of these AI giants wanting more power, they're wanting to use more fossil fuels, and it will take years to develop other forms of energy that will be needed to do all these super computer systems. And I don't know, but it's just we have to get out of this mentality of greed and thinking that the earth is unexpendable in terms of its resources, because all these weather events, we just had one of the strongest tsunamis in history happen near Russia that's affected Japan and Hawaii, and we're waiting if it's going to affect California. We're having all these incredibly bad weather events that are affecting millions of people. And I do hope that all of us who are aware that science matters will want to learn about Tracy Woodruff's work. And she's at the University of California, San Francisco, and there they have the Center to Combat Corporate Harms. And it's the single largest database, she says, for collecting data by big corporations who are making products that are harmful. And the Trump people are systematically getting rid of all of our safeguards. Now, a standing tradition for America of separation of church and state, they're wanting to make it fine to talk politics from the pulpit. Of course, all of the members of the cult of Trump have been talking politics from the pulpit, really from the time of Reagan on, but now more than ever. And so all I can say is we're in an act of resistance that needs to be amplified and coordinated. So please check out my Substack and my interview with Tracy Woodruff next week. And already on our YouTube for premium subscribers is next week's interview with the University of Cambridge social psychologist, one of the highest touted social psychologists in the world, on his work with misinformation. And his book, Foolproof, is a must read. And his name is Sander van der Linden. He's Dutch by background, but living in the UK. And he has basically adopted the notion that information warfare should be treated as a virus. And the best thing to do with viruses is to develop vaccines or inoculations. And he's created a game to teach people how to do disinformation and conspiracy theories. It's called Get Bad News. And that Substack will be out on Monday. So please check into that as well. We continue to develop our bite model research project. For those of you who know, I am a scholar, a fielding fellow for the Institute for Social Innovation. And we're about to launch, and don't go now at this second because it's still getting prepared. There's hours and hours of coding that is being done. But we're doing a 20 question version of from the byte model and a 40 question version where we've changed some of the wording to make things more clear. And we're testing to see if the 20 questions gives the same number on the influence continuum of authoritarian control as the 40 question one. And for those of you who've been following me for a while, you know that I did my doctoral dissertation on a need to create a model for judges and juries to define undue influence using trafficking law. Trafficking law is worldwide recognized worldwide. Sorry about that. Force, fraud, or coercion. And the byte model describes in graphic detail this, which is why it's used by labor trafficking experts and sex trafficking experts. And talking about sex trafficking, let's talk about the Epstein Files and this unprecedented meeting with the DOJ with Ghislaine Maxwell. Never is anyone high up in the DOJ ever talking to a convicted sex pedophile trafficker. But apparently he was sent to do a deal. And while it is being only discussed at the moment, but she may get immunity for so-called testifying. And guess what? She's going to lie and say that Donald Trump had nothing to do with underage girls. Surprise. Why do I think this? Because she has a long track record of lying, even when she's under oath, which is why she's convicted and in jail for a 20-year sentence. Very, very, very upsetting. And we don't want to let the media complex drown out the obvious thing, which is that Donald Trump has campaigned for years about the deep state and how he's going to clean up all of this crimes. He's trying to divert people's attention to Obama, but I don't think it's working. And more people are exiting MAGA. They're having doubts. And you've heard me speak before on the topic of how vital it is for every American to learn about mind control, especially if they were born or raised in an authoritarian family or religion, exited, and then got into the cult of Trump. We don't want them just to get disillusioned with Trump, because guess what? Thiel and Musk and Zuckerberg are moving Vance to take over for Donald Trump. And many people were questioning, would people still follow if they didn't have Donald Trump? And the answer is the Epstein Files are not going away. And I think it's planned. I think it's quite intentional. And then lastly, before we start asking questions, I want to point out two major factions in the cult of Trump. The Christian Dominionists, the New Apostolic Reformation, the Christian Nationalists, the one that have, co-opted the Supreme Court to abandon 50-year legal practice of allowing women to have the choice for their own health care, as well as other things. Gay marriage and other things are now getting challenged. And so we have the people who want to push religion as and make girls and women get out of the workforce and just have babies, white babies. And then the other faction are the techno bros. And if you haven't seen my interview with Greg Epstein about his MIT Press book called Tech Agnostic, he's the Harvard MIT chaplain, humanist chaplain, who basically said big tech and AI is the new religion, world religion. And people are pushing AI as super intelligence and godlike powers, pushing transhumanism, that we should all become augmented humans and spend more time in virtual reality and stay addicted to our cell phones, etc. And neuroscientists are doing a lot of research showing it's not good for the human brain to be online and to rely on AI to do its thinking for us. We need to challenge our brain. We need to use it. Otherwise, we'll lose it. So we have these two competing factions. Unfortunately, the tech bros are the super billionaires, and we'll see how it plays out. But for all of us who care about the Constitution, the rule of law, separation of church and state, human rights, habeas corpus, um, we're being challenged in a way that most of us growing up never imagined would be this bad so fast. Um, because I researched the cult of Trump and I've been doing counter Trump stuff for 10 years full time, I knew this was coming and I predicted it, and I've been talking about it, trying to get people's attention. I've just recently talked with someone from Defending Democracy as well as Indivisible, and they invited me to do a talk. So this is another thing to put on your calendar on the 14th of August. It will be live. I will be speaking at a law school in Springfield, Massachusetts, but it will also be on Zoom for those people who register, and they can register on mobilize.us. And we're going to live stream it onto the Dr. Stephen Hassan YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing slides and doing a short overview of the cult of Trump and what the thesis is, trying to encourage people to actually read it or listen to it, and start reading my other books. Because if we want to bring our country back again, it's going to absolutely demand that people understand psychological warfare and what has been waged and how we're going to counter it and how we're going to help people to reality test and exit. So that's my rant for today. There's so much more we can talk about, but I'm open to your questions. And there's so many news stories. So let's see, Focus Lady, do you agree? Whoops, do you agree? Yes, I agree. No, it went off the screen, Jerry. I don't see it anymore. Anyway, I'll continue till we get the next question up. Some people are asking me, excited for the stream. Thank you. Oh, here we go. Focus Lady, do you agree with scientific researchers pushing back against the current language suppression by avoiding the list of forbidden terms for grant writing with interdisciplinary collaboration? Let me think about this. Do you agree with scientific researchers pushing back? Yeah, I think we should push back. And, you know, a lot of scientific researchers are moving to Europe because they want to do science. And what's happening is people don't seem to understand the human species has evolved this incredible technology because of science, because of medicine. It's not perfect, but praying over illnesses is not the same thing as treating cancer. Yes, we have a lot of power in our mind, but as a cancer survivor myself, I am grateful. I had surgery and 3 months of chemo and 21 doses of radiation because I've been cancer-free for over 20 years, knock on wood. And but it seems the Trump administration is just wanting to bring us back hundreds of years, and it works for Putin and Xi. It will help enhance China's power. I think China is in much stronger position than Russia is. What I hear from my colleagues who research Russia, Putin is pushing the Ukraine war hard and heavy because the Russian people just know how corrupt he and all of the oligarchs are, and they want to keep people engaged and distracted. Oh, and I saw a message from Senator Amy Klobuchar about Russian kidnapping of Ukrainian children. Some 20,000 children have been reportedly kidnapped. And I, quote, retweeted it saying, and they've been reportedly brainwashing these Ukrainians to believe they're really Russians and to turn against their parents, their families, and their country. So why do I keep banging the drum of undue influence? Because I got recruited into the Moonies. And some of my listeners are like, why do you keep bringing up the Moonies, Steve? You got out 49 years ago. It's because, honestly, if it didn't happen to me, I would never believe an intelligent, educated person from a good family could become radicalized and become a right-wing fascist. But it happened to me. And that's why I feel so passionate, why I feel like this is my purpose for my life. And plus, I get a lot of satisfaction out of helping people who say, thank you for writing Combating Cult Mind Control. Thank you for writing The Cult of Trump. Thank you for Freedom of Mind. Thank you for your course. Because really, it's our minds. We should learn how it works and how to protect ourselves. Matthew, what is the best way to deal with paranoia and after coercive control? Good question. So, what I teach in my work, and I have a chapter 10 in the Freedom of Mind book, is a chapter on fear and phobia indoctrination. And essentially, what I say is that we need to be afraid when there's actual danger. So we want to have that adrenaline rush. We get, our heart races. We steel ourselves. We want to have that reaction when there's actually a dangerous threat. But what mind control does is it installs phobias, often using hypnotic techniques, propaganda videos after people are induced into altered states of consciousness, and they install these phobic beliefs. And that's where paranoia comes in. And that's where we need our frontal cortex to evaluate, is there actual danger? Because you're not paranoid if there's actual danger. But if you believe there's danger, but there's no known predator or group that has a history of coming after former members and such, and I have to help people who ask me for consultations, recovery consultations. I have to parse through, who are you? Why are you important to the group? Like if you're wealthy, if you're famous, if you know information inside the group that they don't want to get out, then this is not paranoia. This is fear. And you need to think about, what steps can I take to maximize my safety and minimize the threat? And there's a whole calculus that I've been using for 49 years. And knock on wood, I'm fine and still here. Let's see, Robert Zimmerman. Robert Zimmerman, that's Bob Dylan's real name. Hello. Here, do you think religion like Christianity is a cult and another religion, etc.? So, hi, Robert. I want you to go to freedomofmind.com under Learn and look at my influence continuum. And maybe one of my helpers on this live stream will put up a link. But I have a chart of ethical influence to unethical influence. And I take the position that there are ethical positive religions and there are authoritarian mind control cults. And what we talk about with ethical religious groups is informed consent, which isn't just initially when you're joining, but it's throughout your membership where you can ask questions, get honest answers. There's accountability. There's respect for your conscience, your free will, your critical thinking. They don't tell you what you can read or who you can or can't associate with. There's a whole bite model list for authoritarian religious cults. So I know a lot of former members, they're religiously atheists, they're just like black and white and us versus them in their anger towards religion. But I say there's, good stuff in religion. I believe in don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself, and love your neighbor and take care of the poor and the immigrant and the sick. Do goodness. Love is my preaching. And cult groups say they love, but it's all conditional on dependence and obedience to the leader. So you see historically people who vow loyalty to Donald Trump, and then they raise a doubt or a question about it, and then he comes after them, calling them stupid or idiots or whatever. And, they're now dissed by all the true believers as, evil or the outsider. Uh, I guess the question is about Ghislaine Maxwell. And I think it's very clear that, because I always try to put myself, we can take this question off the screen now. I always try to put myself in other people's shoes and look from their perspectives. And why would Donald Trump send the number 2 person from the Department of Justice in person to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell? Because it makes him legally responsible if he gets subpoenaed to talk about what he was talking about there. I mean, it really is not something that's ever done. It was a desperate act to cut a deal with Ghislaine Maxwell. And now we're hearing her family and her lawyers saying, yep, she'll testify if she gets immunity. But the deal she'll only get immunity if she promises to lie about Donald Trump. That's my take on it. Do I think that they will kill her in jail? No, I don't think so. I can share something some of my colleagues have brought up about Epstein's death, and it's something I had not even considered. And I'll just credit Dave Troy and Amanda. We're on a thread together. They were saying that nobody's talked about the possibility that Epstein was doing self-strangulation in order to get an erection, because he was a sex addict, that he was strangling himself because when you're going to die from strangulation, you get an erection, apparently. And it's a turn on for people who are sadomasochists. And I'd never thought, because we heard he hung himself, but that made no sense. But can someone literally crush their windpipe and strangle themselves? Yeah, apparently so. So there is some credibility in my mind to that theory. So I wanted to just share that. Let's see, Smiley Yash, is he actually losing his base due to Epstein? It seems like most would continue to double down. That's true. However, my theory, and it's just a theory based on, again, all these years of research, my theory is that Putin is finished with Trump. He hacked the elections, got him elected. Susan Wiles was a paid lobbyist for Putin prior to her getting him elected in 2016. Now she's chief of staff. And Putin is a dictator, and he doesn't appreciate Donald Trump criticizing him at all. And so my sense is, and Trump threatening Musk of deporting Musk, because we know Musk and Doge, when they were going into our most private, sensitive government details and data, this is from a whistleblower, one of the IP addresses was a Russian IP address. So it seems to me like this is the play to peel off a lot of his base by having people like Tucker Carlson, who is a known propagandist for Putin, and Alex Jones, and a whole bunch of other well-known Putin propagandists have been criticizing Trump. And that's what's kept this going. And I'll add Murdoch. Because Murdoch's making money on Fox, still getting advertising revenue and such from there, but pushing his Wall Street Journal to do outing of things like that birthday book greeting thing that Donald Trump did. So it's my take, and I've said this before on the live streams, and I hope I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I'm always just never certain. But my prediction is Donald Trump will be no more before the end of the year. And Putin historically has gone out of his way to send a message that he's assassinating people through poison, blowing up a plane with his former general in it. Don't know if he would do it publicly like this, if, just have somebody shoot Trump or poison him. But my prediction is there's going to be a health issue because they were floating a story. He's had horrible health throughout the last 10 years, but they're floating a story about how he has a vein problem and his feet are swelling up. We know that he's getting more and more demented. So I think that the MAGA base is being moved to the Trump, Thiel, Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos sphere. That's my take. Let's see, Focus Lady, Dr. Hassan, have you heard from university professors that the current university applicants can't write or even conduct interviews without AI prompting? Yes, I'm not surprised. And we really have to think, however, with this technological revolution that's happening, what's the purpose of education? And I did see an article in one of the major papers today that the recent graduates, are facing one of the most difficult job markets. Why? Because a lot of the big companies are laying off people. Look at the stats. They're laying off people, which means they're not hiring new people. They're cutting down because they're able to use robots, and robots will get cheaper and cheaper to make and more powerful. But if you really want to succeed, you got to use your brain. You got to read actual books, not ask ChatGPT or some other AI to summarize for it. And you want to read books that challenge you, and you want to have friends, and you want to pay attention to people who don't believe the way you believe. You want to travel the world and learn about other cultures. I realize when I reflect back on my life how lucky I've been that I've traveled the world. And so I learned a long time ago about how people and cultures and different religious backgrounds have radically different ways of viewing the world. One of the most amazing 2-year research programs that I did was actually with the First Nations Children and Family Caring Society of Canada. A social work professor and CEO, Cindy Blackstock, heard me on the Lincoln Project and contacted me. And she basically said, Steve, I've been trying to think how to deprogram my people from colonialization, and you may be able to help. So we did some webinars, we created some information sheets for Indigenous people to study and learn and understand. And so many Indigenous people are dysfunctional and alcoholic and are demoralized. But in reading Cindy's doctoral dissertation and learning about Indigenous culture, I can tell you I am 100% on board with their view of reality is far superior to Western people's. It's looking at the nature as our mother and thinking about 7 generations of our ancestors and 7 future generations as we're making decisions, and having people in extended family and tribes. I just think that is going to be so much healthier if we can get out of this nuclear family and most people get divorced and people are estranged. That's another rant I'd like to go on to for a minute. If there's any therapist that's telling people cut off from your family because they're toxic, get a second opinion, please, because it's not good psychology. It's not. This kind of like all or nothing, black and white, and split people up, and not just from a mother or a father, but their grandparents, their cousins, their siblings. This is cult brainwashing stuff, and it's bad therapy. And there are licensed therapists who are bad, toxic. They may be making a lot of money and selling a lot of merch, but it's unethical. I'm always wanting to empower people to operate out of love and out of choice, realize trauma from the past happened in the past. The important thing is what's happening now, what's within our control, what's outside of our control, and how do we want to proceed to a healthier future. We need to be focused on a healthier future personally, as well as thinking about planetary survival. Let's see, Santika or Santi Casanova. Is there a realistic way of getting Trump out of office, charged with anything significant at any point? I don't think that's realistic because they've co-opted all 3 branches of government. And I know a lot of people are talking about the 2026 election and the 2028 election, but we already know they're cheating. They're wanting to gerrymander. They're wanting to take over voting in locales. They want to make it harder for people to vote. They want to make sure that people can't vote by demanding they have passports or real IDs that they don't have. It's so unfortunately The right wing, the GOP, has a long history with the Tea Party and the extremists of cheating. They think the ends justify the means. This is a major feature of the authoritarian control side of the influence continuum. I say the means create the ends. If you lie, you get more lies. You don't get an ideal world. That was one of my realizations when I started thinking again, when I was deprogrammed in 1976 from the Moonies. So I realized if we keep doing what we're doing, we meaning the Moonies, if they keep doing what they're doing, in 50 years, we'll have more lies. We won't have less. So um, let's come back to common sense. Let's come back to our bodies. Let's listen to our intuition. Let's challenge conspiracy beliefs. When people say something extreme, you need extreme proof. You don't just go along with what everyone else in your circle is saying or believing. I just finished a book by a neuroscientist. I'm trying to get an interview with her. I'm not 100% of her name at the moment. I think it's Falk, Nancy Falk. But she really demonstrated different parts of the brain lighting up and how we are social beings, and we will often want a preference for, let's say we're going to a restaurant with friends. We know what we like, we know what we want to order, but then we hear what everyone else is ordering. And there's a part of our brain that wants the approval of the group and will often defer, even though taste wise we should order whatever. I think it's pizza. We hear what everyone else is wanting, and that becomes more attractive, and we'll go and do that instead of sticking with what we want as if nobody else was there at the table with us. It's a very important concept. And if you've seen my previous works on Substack and on my Psychology Today blog, I talk about the Ash conformity study, and she was showing the neuroscientific basis for why people would look at a line that's obviously not the same size as the other line, but go along with it, even though they can see for themselves what the right answer is. It was a fascinating book. Let's see, have a 5. Have you considered reaching out to an Epstein survivor like Maria Farmer for the pod to connect the dots between your research and the case? Seems like a great opportunity to educate people and support survivors. I am very open to interviewing Epstein survivors. I honestly have just been inundated with my work. I've been working on a Spanish edition, an update, including Hispanic cults to combating cult mind control, and hopefully that will be out in the next week or two. I have 2 weeks from now. I have a Hispanic expert in communication that will, because, a lot of Hispanics got hacked by the cult of Trump and voted for Trump. And now they're looking at all their colleagues and family and friends and seeing how they're being terrorized and how this is you know, a white regime that looks down on brown and black people. It was also fascinating when I interviewed Evelyn. She said a lot of Hispanics don't think of themselves as dark-skinned. They think of themselves as light-skinned. But guess what? ICE and a lot of people in ICE are not law enforcement. I just did a video that will be coming out soon talking about how uh, a person is being, beaten, and one of the lookers on is saying that's not how you arrest somebody. And I'm thinking that's because they're not police. They're probably Proud Boys, people who were given pardons by Trump for their violent insurrection coup attempt at his encouragement. But the point is that a lot of Hispanics are realizing that this administration has betrayed their trust. They wanted their votes, but um, not good. This is not good at all. Let's see. Let's see. The Heritage Detective. Do you believe it is a smart idea to build a country on a religion? Why or why not? Good question. I don't think it's a smart idea to build a country on a religion. It's a good question. But I really think there's a value of separating politics from religion, separation of church and state. We know there are many Muslim countries, and their countries are extremes, and they're trying to do Sharia law. And we see what's happening with the ultra extremists in Israel right now. And half the country is in protest. And last I saw, the ultra Orthodox, who the Supreme Court ordered that they have to serve in the army too, because they never did previously, are demonstrating in the streets because they don't want to have to fight. But they want all of the others who are not in the ultra extremist BITE groups. They want them others to fight. So there's a parallel happening with Israel and the United States, and there's a lot of propaganda, a lot of extremes. If you want to know my opinion, read The Cult of Trump, because I have a section on the Jewish right and Netanyahu as in the cult of Trump and under Putin's sphere of influence. A lot of people don't remember that 1 million Jews emigrated from Russia to Israel. And they don't understand that all these people were born in an authoritarian cult, never got deprogrammed, are still listening to RT TV, the Russian propaganda crap. And they think in black and white, all or nothing, need a czar, need a dictator. And so they're not understanding democratic values, human rights, and such. And it's absolutely tragic. And my heart breaks every time there's a story about what's happening there. And I'm somewhere between Richard Friedman of the New York Times and Mandy Patinkin, who is just very, very aggressive and loud, but I feel his passion because I grew up understanding Judaism and that we've just, we're victims of the Holocaust. And I recently interviewed an Israeli filmmaker, Yariv Mosher, and he just won an Emmy Award for his documentary, We Will Dance Again, about the Nova Music Festival when Hamas on October 7th attacked and murdered and raped and tortured and kidnapped and are still holding hostages. And a lot of people don't realize Palestinians were killed. Palestinians were kidnapped too. And a lot of propaganda is this all or nothing stuff, and it's tragic. And I'm only one person, and my lane is psychology. And I've gotten deeper and deeper into the political world because I did do the Cult of Trump book, but I'm not comfortable because the thing about politics is there's so much corruption and the history of corruption and wealthy people using their power to exploit other people. And again, why can't we just live together and help each other and lift each other up? And that's how I want to live the rest of my life, helping people and lifting them up and trying to give my version of a solution to how we're going to have planetary survival. Let's see. I don't know how to pronounce this. Themagain.g. You said that if Vance entered office and answered that Epstein files are going away, do you mean that you think the authoritarian movement will continue to fall? I don't think the authoritarian movement's going to fall. I think they are deliberately, psychologically weaning a lot of the base of MAGA off of Donald Trump as a figure. Anyone who thinks Donald Trump is brilliant hasn't done their homework. This is an uneducated man. This is a man who doesn't read books. He likes to watch TV. And he's a malignant narcissist, so he's not interested in any feedback that might differ from his own feelings or what's going to be in his best interest. He's a criminal and he's demented. So what I'm thinking is going on is that there is this move to take him off his pedestal to install Vance, because Vance will do what Thiel tells him to do, and Musk and Bezos and Zuckerberg and Putin, and maybe she's in there too. You know, one thing I've learned is about fellow travelers. You know, there are people who will get involved in a political campaign because they think it will advance their agenda. But then when the group takes power, then the different factions start fighting. And the two big ones I mentioned earlier is the Christian dominionists, the New Apostolic Reformation people, that want women to have babies and not be educated, and are white supremacists and racists. And then we have the tech bros who want us to become robots and worship AI and go to Mars. And this notion of long-termism, if you haven't looked up long-termism and transhumanism, accelerationism, and crypto, that's all part of that tech bro ideology. I am anti-crypto unless it's government regulated. Check out my interview with Greg Epstein. It's on my Substack. I think the video is on my Dr. Stephen Hassan YouTube channel. And I believe the audio version is on the Cult Conversations podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all the other places. Listen to it, because we really covered a lot of important things that I think people need to know. I want to thank Cam Murphy, super chat, $20. Wow, that is the most super chat I think we've done since I've started live streaming. We've had lots of 5s and 10s, but thank you. She said, I think it's a woman, but it could be a man. I've been searching for the dividing line between a religion and a cult, but I've been unable to find it. I thought it was the attempt to erode the individual identity, but baptism is rebirth into the religion. It's welcome to my world. My first book came out in 1988, and I've been on every major television show. I've been censored since The Cult of Trump has come out, but I've been saying essentially the same message. I've learned more and more when I got my second master's and my doctorate. But I'm all for, evolving and improving yourself. So I'm not wanting people to have a static identity, but the authoritarian religions create a pseudo self that's often at war with what you actually think and feel and want. And I believe we're embodied minds. So I am very much interested in people being true to themselves, finding out more about themselves, being true to yourself, listening to your conscience, having an internal locus of control. When somebody says you can't have a direct relationship with the divine, you need another human being, or you need to be in an institution or a group, that I go, no, I don't think you need another person. You can have a direct relationship with Jesus or with Hashem or with Allah. You don't, there are teachers who may have studied scriptures, and I'm all for learning. I'm a big fan of Karen Armstrong's scholarship. She wrote a tome called The History of God that I regularly recommend. Let's see. Aaron on TikTok asks, can you talk about what convinced you to leave a cult? Very briefly, I was a fanatic. I was a leader. I was actually in the room with Sun Myung Moon, who I believe was the Messiah, 10 times greater than Jesus Christ or Moses or Buddha, etc. I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night and working 7 days a week for no pay. Dropped out of college, etc. And my story is that I was tasked by my superior on a fundraising mission called MFT, and I went through 3 days of no sleep and woke up as I was driving into the back of a tractor-trailer truck at 80 miles an hour. And when the emergency crews rescued me, they were amazed that I was still alive. But I was, and I think it was a miracle. But thanks to modern medicine and the emergency teams, they shut down the Baltimore Beltway because they thought the van would blow up because it was leaking gas. And back then they didn't have the jaws of life, so they were sawing me out to get me out. Anyway, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks away from the cult, sleeping and eating. Led to me calling my sister, who I had been under orders not to talk. I wasn't doubting the group. I just missed my sister and I had been traumatized. Led to a deprogramming, and that's a whole nother story. I put chapter 2 for free on freedomofmind.com if you want to read the fuller story of my deprogramming and my waking up moment. And it is a Substack blog on my 40th anniversary of my deprogramming, which was May 11th, with a psychiatrist and social worker, 2 of the 4 people who deprogrammed me, both ex-Moonies. So learn about it. But I needed help to get out, and I've been appealing to people, please, if you have family or friends that have been radicalized or you've left a cult, first heal yourself, learn, read, educate yourself, deconstruct the ideology, find out what's healthy, then learn how to talk to people who are still in. Because I believe we can help de-radicalize tens of millions of Americans. And former members are uniquely qualified by just sharing their story if they understand the mechanisms of how mind control breaks your identity down, builds up a new identity, refreezes that identity, and keeps you dependent. I try to explain all of this in my work, and I have a course. Several courses, actually. Go to Freedom of Mind. I have continuing ed courses for psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and counselors, and versions and other courses for former members. I have an 8-hour course of a workshop I taught with John Dehlin to 150 ex-Mormons when I went out to Salt Lake City. Learn about other groups. It will help shine a light on yours. Let's see. Looks like Chelsea. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know your name. Anyway, I keep wondering if we as progressives have taken a more aggressive and authoritarian response to the liars and cheaters attempting to overtake our society, but it seems antithetical to the entire move. I keep wondering if we as progressives have have to take a more aggressive and authoritarian response to the liars and cheaters. I'm not for I don't believe fighting fire with fire, and I don't believe with authoritarian approaches to fight authoritarianism. In fact, that's the secret weapon why I'm so confident, is because being in an authoritarian group sucks. You're suffocated. And what these tech bros are doing, Thiel and his company Palantir and everything, they're building a Chinese surveillance state where they're going to know everything that we've ever written, and they're going to have social credits. And if we want to have privileges, we're going to have to bow to the king and their theocracy that they're putting in. So I think we need to take a strong stand, be very vocal. Did another video recently telling people that while there are Proud Boys in ICE and other criminals, a lot of people are taking jobs in ICE because they're offering a large salary. Of course, they have to wear masks and everything. And my take is you don't know who's behind the mask. And I believe that if you talk like, don't you have a conscience? Would you like what you're doing to that man to be done to your brother or to your mother or to your sister? Asking questions like that and appealing to people's sense of conscience, I think, is a more effective tactic in dealing with this kind of horrendous, fascistic, violent stuff that is being ordered on us. And by the way, it wasn't reported widely in the media, but are you aware a lot of Marines have been moved out of LA because they're like, we fight for America. We're not fighting Americans. And there's no due process. There's no, court warrants. We don't want to do this. And if you're noticing, Trump continues to fire top generals and people in the military because he wants obedience. And these folks have sworn an oath to the Constitution, not to the president. This is a very important concept. Of what made America so great for so long was that we weren't for a king or a top CEO, that we would bow and do whatever they say or else. And all the GOP who were put into cabinet positions, etc., they all had to agree that January 6th wasn't a violent insurrection coup, which it was. So they had to swear an oath of loyalty, and it's not to the law. It's not to conscience. It's not to America. And I really believe that we should be working on all of those GOP people through their families, their friend groups. We need to start thinking strategically how to start making people feel guilty that they've given up their oath to the Constitution and to Americans. Let's see, Mike213 on TikTok says, I'm wondering if Americanism, Christianism, conservatism, and others are all cult-like. I don't know. I don't know what you mean by Americanism, but I'm imagining you mean American exceptionalism, that somehow Americans are better, we're better than all other people around the world. I've always thought that was BS, essentially. But I want anyone who's listening to me to understand, I have an allergy to black and white, us versus them, good versus evil, simplistic formulas for solving the complex problems that we're facing. And we always have to be open-minded to changing our minds as there's new information. We want to make it face saving for people to exit MAGA instead of shaming and blaming and calling them names. And seriously, we really need a shift. Again, please come to my Substack. We're looking for subscribers for that. You can have a week, or I think it's 2 weeks of free access to everything. Start studying, read my books, take my courses, come on my YouTube. I'm going to be doing more courses online. I'm doing this talk on the 14th, Thursday night, 6:30 to 8. Come join me or watch the recording if you can't make it on that night. Let's see. MAGA is often referred to as a cult and compared to the Nazis. Can you refer me to any literature that explores the intersection between political movements and cults? Yes, my books, particularly The Cult of Trump. I also interviewed a professor. His name is Dennis Torish, who himself had been a member of a political cult, and he went on to become a professor and wrote a book on political cults from the left to the right. I interviewed him twice. Check out my interviews with him. And some people are like, Steve, why don't you talk about the left as a cult? I do all the time. China is a cult. Jim Jones and People's Temple was a left-wing cult. Patty Hearst was in the SLA, a political left-wing cult. I interviewed a former member of a Marxist cult, other unnamed left-wing cults. So China is the biggest left-wing cult in the world. So people say, why are you always talking about the right? It's like, I'm against authoritarianism on the left and the right. Ooh, I see it's 4:02 already. I thank you for coming. I appreciate my team for getting on and helping me keep messaging. And follow me at Cult Expert. I think we have 164,000 now on Instagram. If you know people, especially influencers, ask them to have me on. If you know people who would come on my podcast and my show, please contact them. Someone asked me about one of the Epstein victims. Contact them and say, hey, email center@freedomofmind.com. Check out Steve Hassan. He's done a lot of work against trafficking. And check out my interviews with ex-sex trafficking experts, Rachel Thomas, Rebecca Bender, Kadisa Phelps, former labor trafficking expert Paul Chang. Check out my stuff. I've been trying my hardest for a really long time. Thank you for your support. Take care.